All right, let's just dive right in. This explainer is tailored directly for you, the well-meaning, incredibly hardworking nonprofit board member. We're going to take a really hard, honest look at how boards actually operate. Because, look, whether you're sitting on the board of a local charity, a massive international NGO, or a church, the governance principles you use, or, well, the ones you think you use, they literally dictate the success of your entire organization. Today, we're unpacking some brilliant insights from John Pearson's review of John Carver's powerhouse book, Boards That Make a Difference. We're going to dig into the hidden pitfalls of board control, and more importantly, how to avoid them. Let's start things off by tossing what reviewer John Pearson calls a verbal grenade right into the middle of the boardroom, just to spark a little healthy conflict, right? If you really want to see a room full of nonprofit CEOs or board chairs suddenly squirm in their seats, just hit them with this quote. Hey, what do you all think about policy governance? It sounds totally innocent, but the truth is, policy governance is probably one of the most widely claimed, yet completely misunderstood frameworks in the whole nonprofit world. Section 1, the micromanagement trap. The blatant reality. Pearson, who consults with a ton of nonprofit boards, is, frankly, super skeptical. He actually says he just straight up doesn't believe boards when they claim to use policy governance. Why? Because their day-to-day micromanaging is just so blatant. They use all the right buzzwords, sure, but their actions? Totally different story. And that perfectly captures policy governance guru John Carver's point here. As a board member, you probably say your job is the big picture. We all say that. But Carver argues that professing to deal with that grand vision is literally impossible when you're completely bogged down in the minutia. I mean, think about it. If you spend your precious meeting time inspecting one tree at a time, arguing over carpet colors or a minor staff hire, you completely lose sight of the forest. You surrender the strategic high ground. Section 2. The approval syndrome, micromanagement flaws. So the engine driving all this micromanagement is this belief that to exercise fiduciary duty, the board has to formally approve every single thing the staff does. But instead of creating safety, this creates a massive bottleneck. Just listen to these symptoms of the approval syndrome. Reactivity, a sheer volume of material, mental misdirection, short-term bias. It is devastating to efficiency. When you demand to approve absolutely everything, you're buried in material no part-time volunteer could ever actually read. But the absolute worst part? Fragmentation. The approval syndrome shatters your governance into these massive, unmanageable vertical slices, approving one program here, one hire there, instead of weaving a holistic, manageable fabric of horizontally connected policies that actually guide the organization. Section 3. The confidence vote myth. Solidarity versus weakness. Okay, let's bust a completely counterintuitive myth about giving a CEO a quote-unquote vote of confidence during a crisis. You've probably been there, right? Closed-door session, the CEO makes a really tough call, and someone chimes in, hey, let's take a formal vote to back them up. It feels like great leadership, the intention is pure. Carver points out that boards often use the approval process here not to restrict authority, but to confirm it. You're trying to cloak a controversial executive decision with the prestige of the boardroom. You want the staff or the donors to know, hey, we are really behind the CEO on this. Seems totally harmless, doesn't it? Well, here comes Carver's zinger. When you contrast that intended message with the actual signal being sent, it reveals a pretty harsh truth. You want a healthy show of solidarity? Sure. But the actual signal you're broadcasting? It's that your general philosophy of delegation is fundamentally weak. Why? Because giving this specific official stamp of support implies that sporadic backup is actually necessary. It basically tells everyone that without this special little vote, the CEO didn't truly have the authority to act in the first place. Carver's conclusion here is that if a board has already made it crystal clear that all CEO decisions made within board-stated boundaries are fully supported, then these specific, one-off official approvals are almost never warranted. Actually, he states it point blank in his 340-page book, Board Approvals Are an Unnecessary and Dysfunctional Method of Board Control, period. It doesn't matter how ubiquitous the practice is in the nonprofit sector, it's just a completely different paradigm of what control actually means. Section 4, Governing by Policy, a proactive approach. So, if you aren't supposed to be micromanaging and you aren't supposed to be endlessly approving staff decisions, what on earth are you supposed to be doing during your meetings? The answer is true policy governance. That means governing out of policy. Under this system, literally no board activity takes place without reference to policies. Policy development isn't just some chore you knock out at an annual retreat. It is your chief occupation. Most of the resolutions in your meetings should simply be motions to amend your overarching policy structure. You set the boundaries, you set the goals, and then, this is the key, you get out of the day-to-day weeds so your staff can actually execute. To help visualize this, Carver's book provides some fantastic concrete examples of these overarching policies. For instance, he highlights an ends policy, that's a big Carver term for defining the desired results of the organization, from the Lancaster County Bible Church. This is huge because it shows how this model works in real, breathing nonprofits and faith-based organizations, not just in some theoretical corporate boardroom. It's all about clearly defining the what and the why, while leaving the how entirely up to the CEO. Section 5. Your board's next steps. Defining reality. Now, whether you ultimately buy into Carver's very specific, rigorous brand or not, you do need to define your current reality as a board and figure out exactly where your preferred governance future lies. The good news? You have a whole continuum of choices for implementing this. On one extreme, you've got Carver's massive, comprehensive approach, a 340-page book plus 80 pages of resources. On the other end, you have options like the lean and mean approach from Frederick Laughlin and Robert Ndringa. In their book, Good Governance for Nonprofits, they advocate for a tight 10 to 15-page board policies manual. You just have to find the scale that actually fits your specific nonprofit. But hey, before you go taking all the blame as a board member, Pearson makes a really fascinating observation. Board members can't always take the fall for governance dysfunction. Sometimes CEOs and senior team members practically invite the confusion themselves. They'll bring these hyper-granular agenda items to a meeting that basically beg the board to micromanage them. It takes a ton of discipline from both the board and the executive team to actually stay in their respective lanes. Which leaves us with a critical question to evaluate our own organizations. Is it clear where the line falls between board decisions and staff decisions? Because if you're constantly debating operational details, you're already slipping right back into that approval syndrome. That line needs to be bright, clear, and understood by every single person sitting at that table. Carver's counsel definitely minces few words, but I absolutely love this quote from him. I am hard on boards simply because I know how good they can be. I mean, that perfectly captures why it is so incredibly worth the effort to ditch these dysfunctional control methods. Your nonprofit is doing vital work, and to reach your organization's true potential, you need a board that is operating at its absolute peak, focused entirely on the forest, not the individual trees. So I'm going to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative self-evaluation to challenge how you show up at your very next board meeting. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being absolutely extraordinary, how good is your board right now? Be totally honest with yourself. And more importantly, what is one step you can take today to move closer to that 10? How can you leave the micromanagement behind and embrace true policy governance? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.